3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tony T. Tomorrow, that is. This is getting the higher show that's helping you, the military member, successfully transition from your military career to your civilian. Hope you're exciting, a little poppy, a little high energy. I'm a big fan of fun, so I hope you are too. Big shout out to Epidemic Sound, helping me with the music for this show. This is a What's Up. You can find that on Epidemic Sound, subscription service that you can get for your YouTube channel if you're a YouTuber too. So today's episode, let me kill that audio. Today's episode is the first for the month of February, and this is the first episode after, sorry as I'm adjusting those levels, the first episode after Bell Let's Talk. And very interesting week this week as far as Bell Let's Talk is, for those who aren't familiar, is Bell's sponsored focus on mental health. In previous years, there had been a high profile and focus on military members and emergency services personnel. And this year, a little less so, but still obviously all part of the mental health envelope. And this past week has been a very interesting week. You would think in a week that highlights attention to things like mental health, that mental health would be something that everyone is having a better time or an easier time dealing with, having access to all the resources and tools and so on. The thing that I found this week was really, it stimulated a lot of conversations about mental health. And this week I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine about mental health and what I refer to as the military mindset. And let me know if this is your experience. As a military member, we have, in the course of our duties, our job, whatever the occupation is that you have, we are regularly and routinely asked to perform at a high level. Not only that, but we're more than normally asked to make small, medium, or even large sacrifices for the organization, whether that be the government or the specific branch that you're in, your unit, or even the members of your team. Sacrificing your time, your family's time, sometimes even your resources as far as time, energy, your health as far as perhaps you're exerting yourself perhaps a little more than you should, or stressing yourself to a degree that isn't necessarily called for in that moment. But nonetheless, you're all about getting the job done. Whether you're given minimum or maximum resources, minimum or maximum time, our mission, our goal is to be able to accomplish that mission, and we will do everything possible to be able to get that job done. And that's our focus. And so for this week, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about those moments when you are injured and you're measuring your perhaps your past performance to your current performance, your past standards to your current state of performance. Many of us, through our the adoption of our military culture, have a high standard. We have a history of high performance. We perform in stressful circumstances. We perform at and in around other high performers. And we have a culture and a camaraderie built around being able to rely upon your winger, the person next to you, to be able to deliver in the clutch, in stressful circumstances, when it counts. And the question then comes up when you are doing that, when you are pushing yourself to the limit, when you're giving 110%, knowing that 110%, anything above 100% is unsustainable, and that eventually you will fatigue. Eventually you will tire. Eventually you will have to take a step back, rest, recuperate, and retool for the next moment when you have to exert yourself at 100 and over your 100% capacity. And we all have that kind of stretch or burst capability, but like I say, it's unsustainable. I find in a military environment, we are often asked to do this, perhaps sometimes for extended periods of time, and as a result, some of us get hurt. In the course of getting hurt, once you're injured, do you have the self-awareness and the mindset to be able to take a step back, take a knee, and say, I need this time to rest and recuperate? Or if you've been injured in such a way that you know that you're never going to be back to 100% of what you were, are you able to come to terms with that and realize that you can never quite be what you were before, but nonetheless, your 80%, your 60% is somebody else's 100% or 80%? That you're, idling, so to speak, at 60 is somebody else's high performance capacity, that 80 to 100% range. Or you're pushing it is now only 80% of what it used to be. But nonetheless, that 80% is still a high level of performance, some people's 100%. This is something I think many of us with a military background struggle with. If you've been hurt, if you've been injured, if you are forced to take a step back from the career path, the obligations that you have in your occupation, in your trade, within your unit, within your element, you have an expectation of yourself to not only be there for your teammates, for your wingers, for your shipmates, for your crew. You need to be there in order to be able to lead by example, to support your your coworkers, your companions, your brothers and sisters in arms, to be able to get whatever it is done that you need to do. I know when I got hurt, my whole mindset wasn't about the fact that I was hurt and I needed to kind of take a step back. It was fix me so I can get back doing what I was doing. Get me back into my career. Get me back on the ship. Get me back on the job. I need to be, contributing, like, pop me a pill, give me a prescription, whatever it is, just get me back on the ship and get me doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Job focus, mission focus, get it done. And a lot of us are that way. It's natural. It's ingrained. It's kind of the culture of our business in that we are results focused. But when you are impacted in such a way that you know that you will never be able to perform at your previous level of 100% or your stretch capacity of 110, 15, 20%. At what point do you look in the mirror and have the self-awareness to realize that it's time for you to focus on yourself, especially if you know that whether it be, the administrative process or what have you, has, for all intents and purposes, taken you out of either the running for your career trajectory. For example, in the Canadian military, if you're on a permanent category, a PCAT, you can't be promoted. If you can't do a fitness test, you can't do a force test, then you're not eligible to be promoted. So if you know that you're no longer in the running for that and there's no kind of drive and competition other than your obligation of duty, where's your motivation to push yourself harder, faster, stronger, to be able to be competitive amongst your peers, to be able to get that next promotion, that next position, that next thing that you want to get to progress. And if you know that, for example, the administrative process surrounding your injury is such that it's going to relieve you of duty because you are no longer fit or capable to do that job because of your medical limitations, well, then at what point do you stop focusing on the needs of the organization and you start focusing on yourself? This discussion, this debate, this kind of like mental exercise that you go through, even just thinking about it, is incredibly stressful because your paradigm, your perspective is myopic in that you're, for many of us, and it was for me in this case, very focused on your career. As a naval warfare officer, formerly known as Mars officers, known to eat their own, very competitive trade in that everyone's, gunning for a limited number of positions to be able to progress, move on, and move up, move forward. That there is a very clear sense of accomplishment, energy, and drive to be able to move and progress along that track. And if you are taken off that track for various reasons, but in this case, like for example, for mental health issues or physical health issues, and you're not able to progress anymore, and you're told that you're no longer going to be eligible to progress, or you're going to be released from the forces because of this injury, this medical condition that you have, well, then what do you do? When do you start focusing on yourself as a priority versus the organization? And do you give yourself permission to do that? In my case, when I was going through this same struggle, this same, conversation in my head, I was very much focused, like I said, get me back to work, get me back to the ship, pop me a pill, do whatever. Like I need to get rid of this this hindrance, this weight on my shoulders, this thing that was dragging me down, so that put that aside so I can get on with the business of the military, of the Navy, of my career. I need to get back to it. At the time, my ship's getting ready to go to sea. I need to go to sea with my ship. Let's get this done. Make me fit for sea. Let's go. It wasn't, and even though there were so many red flags for me, so many red flags, that I was not in a condition to be able to do that, in the sense that you put me in a demanding, stressful, high-performance situation, whereas before I could perform at that level, now I could not. Even if I wanted to, and I did, regardless of my desire, regardless of my effort, regardless of my intent, my capacity to perform at that level wasn't there. I was trying to get to 100. I was trying to get to 110. I was trying to go to 120. Like I was trying to run that 5K, let's say, but my leg was broken, and I just didn't have the sense to realize, you don't run on a broken leg. Just let it heal. The more you try and run on it, not only will you not be able to run the distance or run it in any kind of reasonable time, you're going to further hurt yourself, and it's only going to worsen the whole scenario. And I know for me, that was a conversation I did not want to have. That was news that I did not want to hear. And at least initially, I was not interested in that, in having that conversation. The conversation was, get me back to work, not, sideline me to rest and recuperate. Within the military organization, for those of us in the Canadian military, there's an organization called JPSU, where basically those who need to have time to rest and recuperate are posted there, removed from their ship posting, so that they can rest and recuperate. At least that was the structure in the organization at the time when I was hurt. And so I got posted there. And I hated that. I hated that idea. I was really resistant to that for the longest time. And to be fair, the organization, like the Navy, was willing to give me space and time. They attached posted me to other units, shore-based units, so I could have time to have the time and the bandwidth to be able to recuperate. Unfortunately, I didn't have the ability to get better in the time frame that they needed me to get better by. And by the time I realized that, for example, in my situation, that the administrative process had engaged to a point where, as I like to refer to it, the train had left the station and I didn't even realize I was on the first car. Wow. I was shocked. I was at a briefing. Just for my own information, I figured I'd been involved in the administration for members of my department going to the same organization. And since I was in that situation, it would be important for me to know that going forward. Great opportunity to learn. I go to this briefing. Halfway through the briefing, it's like a light bulb goes on, and I realize, oh my God, that's me. And it's already too late. I had no idea. And it was very, very difficult. I was so very angry for so long. But I had to come to terms with it. I had to come to terms with the fact that this is the way things were progressing. This is the way things were going. I didn't have... I could choose to be angry, resist, hold on, or I could choose to lean into it, embrace the change, and make the best of it. And for the first little bit, I was resisting because that was my instinct. I was like, no, My identity is this. Myself is this. My career is this. How dare you take this away from me? It took me it was a very difficult journey to realize that I had to let go. It's like if you're afraid of heights, which I am. It's funny. It's a silly thing. So I remember I was doing my clearance diving course, and that's got to be the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, physically. The selection was hard. The course itself was brutal. And if only because it was the course, it was the selection for a year, of which I completed 9 months. And I remember just one point we were climbing ropes. So you jump in the water, you got a wetsuit on, jump in the water, and you climb up these ropes to the top of this kind of like bar, wooden pilings in the water. You climb up to the highest point and jump in the water. It's perfectly safe. I'm standing up on the top of this thing to jump in the water, and no one else is, or at least no one else is letting on that they're afraid of heights. I am afraid of heights. I'm standing on the top of this thing, and to be fair, like, it's high, but it's not crazy high. And I'm getting those butterflies and that anticipation and that moment gut check when you're like, do I really want to jump? And of course I do, and so I jump. But there's that moment of fear, that moment of anxiety, of doubt, when you're faced with that choice of letting go, of jumping, of doing something that your body, your mind, that your gut is telling you, don't do this. But rationally, you have to. In that case, I had to, not only because of the peer pressure, and I didn't want to look weak in front of everybody else. But I mean, that was just something I had to do. And I was just jumping in water. It was no big deal. But scale it up. Jumping out of a plane. For someone who's afraid of heights, being like, taking the para course, or jump course rather, sorry, and jumping out of planes with a parachute, that can be incredibly scary. For some people, bungee jumping, and for me it would be. I've never bungee jumped, but to bungee jump would be incredibly crazy for me. Jumping out of a plane, equally so. And in that moment when you're like ready to jump out or walk off the back of the plane, or in this case, let go, if you're going to do bungee jumping, you've got that moment where you're like, your body's saying, don't do this. And you're like, no, I am. And you go. That same kind of like trepidation, that fear, that doubt was what I was feeling when I was leaning into this change. And even today, I still feel that in a lot of ways. Because my transition's not over. My transition for me in this context is a process. It is continuous. It is not complete. So to embrace that change, to give myself permission to do that was incredibly difficult, and I did. And I would encourage you all to do the same in your own situation. I've gotten a little off track. Let me circle back here a little bit. So I started this train of thought with a conversation I'd had with a friend about the military mindset and the standards of performance that we have for ourselves. And the conversation was about giving yourself permission when you rationally know that you are unable to perform at the standard or at the level that you could or did before. So, for example, if you have a physical injury, like we talk about, when we talk about mental health, we often talk about it in the context of if you had broken your leg, is it reasonable for a person with a broken leg to sit down, put their leg up, and rest as that leg is healing? Is it reasonable that they have crutches and a cast and be excused PT? It is reasonable to do that. it is reasonable and encouraged for them to rest and recuperate so that when that cast comes off, they can begin their rehabilitation, that it's healed properly, that they've given their body a chance to heal properly so that they can develop their strength and be as strong, if not stronger, when they come back. If you know that, for example, let's say you've lost a limb, you'll never be able to do that running, walking, that physical performance piece the same way you did before. Yes, you'll have perhaps, they have those special running. I don't know the terminology for it, but they have those special. They're like wishbone attachments you can put on depending on your scenario to be able to help you run. Like Pretorius had those, and he was able to run very fast. So they have prosthetics, regardless, that allow you to be able to perform to a degree or be able to accomplish a certain capacity of performance or capability that you perhaps had before. But it'll never be the same. You'll never be able to run and change direction and play hockey, for example, the way you did before. And that's something you have to come to terms with. If it's an upper body injury, maybe, you'll never be able to like bench press. Perhaps if you tear your rotator cuff, you're not doing heavy bench anymore. You tear your bicep, you're not going to be sweating it out in the gym doing bicep curls. And so you need to be able to acknowledge your physical limitations and however those physical limitations are affecting your mental performance, either the way in which you got the injury, did you suffer an OSI, an operational stress injury, in the course of getting that physical injury? Are you incurring an OSI now or PTSD now because of the pain and suffering you're going through of your rehabilitation of the pain of dealing with that injury? Is it nerve pain? Is it bone pain? Is it ghost limb pain? Is it, there's so much there. And maybe you were, high speed operator before, and now you can't do that anymore. Maybe you were, your mental acuity was, next level. You were fantastic at mental math. You were able to, you had a photographic memory. And because of head trauma, perhaps you don't have that anymore. If we look back on the way we were, because as we grow up, especially, and I'm not sure, I can only speak to this as a man growing up as a boy and then to a man and so on, that the encouragement and the expectation is that you always get bigger, you always get stronger, you always get faster, and you always improve. And that you really never take a step back. It's always growing, accelerating, growing, getting better, and so on, improving. Constant pace of improvement. That's kind of like our career trajectory. You're expected to, progress or get out to a certain degree. So when you reach a point where you can't progress any further, in fact, you have to regress, how do you resolve that? How do you mentally deal with that? In my case, last week and even the first part of this week, I had a moment, a period of time where I had to really dial back the amount of stress that I was putting on myself because of my own issues. I had to take a step back. I had to give myself room, space, room to maneuver to be able to deal with what I was dealing with and come out the other end, and then be motivated and driven to do stuff. And one casualty of that, which drives me crazy, and I need to give myself permission to say this is okay. Last week on this show, when I was talking to you, I talked about specifically that I was going to make a film for Bell Let's Talk. And in the course of trying to get that film ready, I wasn't able to get it done, obviously, because the video isn't out. I got very upset with myself over that. But so what? Yes, and you know, the video didn't come out on Wednesday. Yes. Now what? So now I sit down here at 1500 on Friday and I talk to you about it. I'm accountable to you. I tell you what's going on. I tell you why that happened. I mean, I can give you reasons and excuses. I had problems with my camera. Of course, my motivation to get out there. Once I got out there, the freaking memory card wasn't working and whatever. Excuses, but the bottom line is I didn't get it done. I didn't allot myself enough time to have these kit problems. I didn't give myself enough room for managing the project. I didn't give myself enough buffer, slack as it's referred to manage or mitigate any of these kind of constraints or problems that I would experience. I was very much all just-in-time delivery, and because I had some problems, I wasn't able to deliver it in time. Now, I'm going to still work on that video. I was going to have it come out. My intent was to have it come out on Bell Let's Talk, on a Wednesday because it was timely and appropriate and so on. And I'm going to still work on that. I'm going to try and reshoot it the footage I have is not coherent and it doesn't work well. So I'm going to reshoot it and try and redo that film, that short video, and have it be a little bit more poignant and universal as opposed to just for Bell Let's Talk. Because I think there's some good lessons to be learned. I mean, even just talking about this today with you, about the journey that I went through, about being on the train, having it leave the station, realizing I was on, the first car and I had no idea, to getting to the point where you're coming to terms with the fact that you aren't going to be able to perform it the way you used to before, that you're taking a step back. See, even now I have trouble with it. That you're taking a step back in your level of performance and that you have to start moving forward again. Maybe it's in a slightly different trajectory, slightly different direction. In navigation, there's a term called course made good. And what that refers to is that you can steer for something, like I can look at you in the camera and be running, like heading in your direction. But if I'm on water, for example, the wind can push me in a certain direction and the water can be moving underneath me because of current, and it moves me. It's called set. And so it moves you in a certain direction. And so your vector, the combination of your forward momentum and whatever lateral momentum you have due to set, puts you in a relative motion, not quite out where you're steering. So I could be steering for you, but I'm heading off to the side. So I'm heading, let's say, straight north, but my course made good because of being set by winds from the east is north-northwest. So I'm just off. But I'm still heading in a forward direction, so that's good. So in this case, I might be heading in a slightly different direction, but I'm still moving forward. I'm not heading straight for you. I'm not heading straight towards my goal, straight towards my objective, but I'm still making progress. I'm moving the ball down the field as we're approaching the Super Bowl. Making progress, getting yards downrange, getting it done. And so when it comes to your potential situation, or a situation where you have colleagues and friends, shipmates, wingers who are going through difficulty and challenges, whether it be pain, stress, physical or mental disability, anxiety, I think I said anxiety, but if you're going through this, if you have a friend, a winger, a colleague who is going through this, but they're still moving forward, they're still, getting the work done, maybe not in the way that they used to, but they're still producing work. They're still getting things done, and they're still doing the recuperation piece. They're still working on their healing, their recovery, whatever that piece is. Encourage them. Support them. And if it's you're looking in the mirror and you're having this conversation, give yourself permission to not be what you're 100% used to be. Have the self-awareness to realize that you are perhaps never going to get to that 100% again. But acknowledge for yourself and give yourself the permission that your 80%, your 90%, your 70% is somebody else's 100%. So how does this all relate to, this is kind of all in the conversation in the context of you're in the military now. But if you're on your way to transition or you're moving into the civilian space, what does that mean? If you have any self-doubt, so one challenge a lot of us face when we get out is we have a misaligned perspective of ourselves when we leave. It can either be really low in the sense that I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm not good enough, I'm, what can I do? You lost some motivation, direction, identity, and so on, and you perceive yourself to have no value. So that's one extreme. Or you could come out high as a kite on your ego. I was this rank, I did this job, I am, Superman or Supergirl, I am the rock star, I am the all-star position of the job that I did, and I should be recognized as such. And obviously, those two extremes aren't reality. You might have been a phenomenal hull tech, pilot, Mars officer, infanteer, logistician. Maybe you're awesome at finance and balance sheets and cost reduction. Maybe you're awesome at project management and being able to organize transport. Maybe you are an operator of some type, and whatever you do in your operation or your technical field, if you're a technician, you rock at that. And if you are those things, then fantastic. And especially with technicians, I mean, you have accreditations that really kind of like pegs the bar of like your level of performance. But as awesome as you were, as awesome as you think you are, the rest of the world, the rest of the civilian world may not either A, realize that that's the case or care that that's the case. And they just think you're one of them. And you have to show, not tell about how good you are. You have to show, not tell how competent you are. You have to show, not tell how valuable you are to an organization. So whether you have a certain number of technical credentials, that's great. And maybe you're so much more than those technical credentials because of what I will argue is your military mindset and that culture and training that you have. Maybe you don't have those technical credentials and you are really great at leadership and management and project management and you've got all that military mindset stuff. You're driven, you're self-motivated, you've got the tenacity and drive to get things done. You can explain that in a military context when it's like when you're swimming with the sharks, you're just one of the sharks. But when you're a shark swimming among, the guppies, you're a rock star. So you gotta be that shark, swim amongst the other fish, and show how capable you are. Show how fast. Bad way to look at it. Not fast, strong, and capable you are, but rather how you're able to perform. And if you have any doubts about yourself, again, coming back to the mental health piece, if you have any doubts about yourself because, and I deal with this, you think, well, if I go into that, if I go into this job, I go into this position, I go into this role, it's going to be hard. There's going to be overtime. There's going to be stress. How am I going to deal with it? Let me tell you. And I mean, I have to kind of check myself sometimes. Do you realize that people pay money, not only for corporate retreats, but personal training, to go to boot camp, to do military style training, to have imposed upon them military discipline so that they can taste it and feel it, to have military environment experiences because it will make them better team players, team leaders, operators, executors, salesmen, salespeople, what have you. So people pay money for that. You have that naturally because you've done it. I mean, basic training, I laugh because you think back and basic training was basic, like it was easy. It wasn't complicated, and yet it is for some. Not everybody finishes basic. You go through phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 training. Think about how many people didn't make the grade along your progression. Think about once you got to your trade, whether you're, again, infantry, armor, artillery, pilot, you get to that level of training, who didn't make the cut? Who wasn't able to do that job? Who had to do an occupational trade or occupational transfer, rather? Who left the military and did something else? Your experience, your operational experience, have you been deployed? That is a level of experience that people, civilians, may not appreciate, may not understand. You have to contextualize, but for yourself, have the confidence to know that while I don't want you to think that you're special and that you're better than other people, better than civilians, I want you to realize that you are incredibly capable, that you're incredibly competent, that you have the ability to be a rock star idling at 60 or 80. And if 60 or 80 is all you can perform because of injury, that's still somebody else's 100%. And you're just, that's your normal standard. Or maybe you're performing below what you perceive your standard is, but it is rock star status outside of the military. Give yourself permission to not be the 110% that you were before. Give yourself permission to rest and recuperate. Give yourself permission on the other end of transition to, again, if you're dealing with injury, not hold yourself to that same standard if you can't perform that way, because the standard that you can perform at now is still rock star status. You got to show and not tell. You got to prove yourself. You got to demonstrate that capability. But for yourself, when you're looking in the mirror, for your self-awareness, for your self-assessment, know that you are that capable. You are that good. And of course, if you don't have any of these injuries, you're even more capable to be able to adapt and move with the different experiences or situations, circumstances that you're going to have to deal with. I'll close out today's episode because here we are over 30 minutes. Again, talking about mental health and giving yourself permission to take a day. Take a minute, 5 minutes, however long you need. If you need to take a week, a month, whatever. If you're recovering, if you had to go in for surgery, you're going to be in the hospital for a while. You're going to be recovering from that surgery for a while. I remember back in 2003, I had my appendix out. It was kind of a sudden thing. And I was out for, I wouldn't say that I was bedridden for a week, but I was in bed for half a week, and I couldn't, I was running. I was rickshaw running at the time as a summer job in Toronto, and I couldn't run. I couldn't push, load. I couldn't, because it was, it's your abdomen, your core, that you use your core for everything. It's like when you have a back injury, you can't do anything. So anyways, I could walk around, but it was, very gingerly. I looked like an old man. I needed someone with me whenever I was walking. Obviously, I'm pain meds, stitches, all this kind of stuff. Even though it was like laparoscopic surgery, relatively non-invasive, but nonetheless surgery. And you got to give yourself time to recover from that. And so I ended up taking, I think it was 3 weeks to be able to fully recover and get back to running. Because, I mean, I'm not just running myself, but running with pulling 200, 300, 400 pounds, whatever it be. So in this case, you need to be able to give yourself permission, whether it's a mental injury, a physical injury, or a combination of the two. You need to be able to give yourself permission to be able to have the time to rest and recuperate, have the time to be able to get better, to be able to get to a point where you're more capable of doing the things you want to do. Don't overtax yourself. Don't put yourself in a position of further harm and injury. Don't give yourself permission not to perform at that level. And if you're at a previous level of performance, and if you're on the path of release because of your situation, then give yourself permission to deal with that. Be fully capable, rest and recuperated, treated, rehabbed, whatever it be, so that when you're on the other end, when you're in transition, when you're officially a civilian and a veteran and not a military member anymore, that you have as much capacity and bandwidth and capability to be able to focus on the transition piece as opposed to the rehabilitation piece, because trying to do both at the same time is difficult. I've been there, I've done that. It sucks. So, anywho, let's think about more positive things as we're on our way out here. A little bit more music. Back to the scenario. I'm a big fan of funk music. So thank you very much for joining us here today on Getting to Hired. Again, this is a live show every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. You can join us either live or catch the repeat, the rebroadcast of the stream after the fact. Thank you very much for joining us. Please leave your ideas, your comments, your recommendations, your experience in the comments below. I want to hear from you. I want to understand your scenario. And am I spitting truth here, or am I just spinning a yarn? You tell me. Let me know how real the experience is that I'm telling you is for you, or whether I'm just out to lunch. Either way, I want to hear from you. I want to know how this helps or impacts you in some way. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you like this video, give us a big thumbs up on either LinkedIn or YouTube. And if you are so inclined, feel free to hit the subscribe button along with little bell notifications so you know when we go live, when new videos are posted. And every Wednesday, as I knock on the wood, every Wednesday, new video dropping, and every Friday, live stream. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'll catch you next week. Bye for now.